Have you ever wondered what would happen if you stopped trying to make everyone else happy? What if, for just one moment, you chose your own truth over their approval? What if the very thing you've been taught makes you good actually makes you invisible? Carl Rogers, one of the most revolutionary psychologists of the 20th century, discovered something that still unsettles therapists today. He found that the people who seemed the most giving, the most selfless, the most devoted to others were often the most disconnected from themselves. They had become experts at reading everyone else's needs while remaining strangers to their own. Rogers called this the false self, a carefully constructed persona designed to earn love through performance. But what he witnessed in his therapy sessions revealed a darker truth. The more we please others, the more we disappear. The more we give, the more we become ghosts in our own lives. Think about the last time you said yes when every fiber of your being wanted to say no. Think about the smile you wore while your soul was screaming. Think about the conversation where you agreed with someone just to avoid conflict, even though their words felt like daggers to your authentic self. These moments aren't kindness, they're acts of self-abandonment. Rogers observed something profound in his clients. Those who had spent their lives people-pleasing would often sit in his office and say, "I don't know who I am anymore." They had become so skilled at morphing into what others needed that they had lost contact with their own inner landscape. Their real thoughts, feelings, and desires had been buried so deep that they felt like archaeological artifacts from a forgotten civilization. But here's what Rogers discovered that changed everything. When his clients finally stopped pleasing others, something extraordinary happened. It wasn't what they expected. It wasn't what society told them would happen. It was something far more profound and, initially, far more terrifying. The first thing that happens when you stop pleasing others is that you feel like you're dying. Not physically, but psychologically. Rogers called this the disintegration of the false self, and it feels like losing everything that made you valuable. The approval you've been addicted to suddenly disappears. The constant validation that kept you feeling worthy evaporates. You're left standing naked in front of a mirror asking, "Who am I when I'm not performing?" This phase is excruciating because your people-pleasing self was like a drug. It gave you temporary hits of connection, belonging, and worth. When you stop administering this drug to yourself, you go through withdrawal. You feel selfish for having boundaries. You feel guilty for saying no. You feel terrified that people will leave you if you're not constantly giving. Rogers watched his clients navigate this psychological death, and he noticed something beautiful emerging from the ashes. Once they stopped performing, once they stopped contorting themselves into shapes that fit other people's expectations, space opened up. Space for something that had been waiting patiently in the shadows of their consciousness, their authentic self. Your authentic self, Rogers discovered, isn't loud. It doesn't scream for attention. It doesn't demand to be noticed. It simply exists, quietly, powerfully, with an unshakable sense of its own worth. But it can only emerge when you stop drowning it out with the constant noise of other people's needs and expectations. When you stop pleasing others, the second thing that happens is that you become incredibly uncomfortable with silence. You realize how much of your identity was built on being needed, on being useful, on being the one who solved everyone else's problems. Without this role, you don't know how to exist in relationship with others. You don't know how to just be. Rogers encouraged his clients to sit with this discomfort, to resist the urge to immediately fill the void with new ways of earning approval. He understood that this emptiness wasn't a problem to be solved. It was a sacred space where the real you could finally breathe. As this space expands, something miraculous begins to happen. You start noticing your own thoughts without immediately judging them against what others might think. You start feeling your own feelings without instantly strategizing how to manage or hide them. You start wanting things, really wanting them, not because they'll make you look good, but because they genuinely call to your soul. But here's where Rogers' insights become truly radical. He discovered that when people stop pleasing others, they don't become selfish monsters, as they feared. Instead, they become more genuinely loving, more authentically generous, more truly present in their relationships. Why? Because their giving is no longer driven by fear and desperation. It's driven by choice and fullness. When you give from your authentic self, you give because you want to, not because you have to. You give because you see someone truly, not because you need them to see you as valuable. You give because your cup is full, not because you're trying to fill an endless void of unworthiness. Rogers noticed that his clients who had learned to stop people-pleasing began to attract different kinds of relationships. The people who had been drawn to their false self, those who needed constant accommodation, endless forgiveness, unlimited emotional labor, began to fall away. This loss felt devastating at first, like evidence that they were becoming cold and unlovable. But in the space left behind, something beautiful happened. New people appeared. People who didn't need them to be diminished to feel elevated. People who could handle their authentic emotions. People who respected their boundaries and actually found them more attractive, not less, when they stopped performing. Your authentic self, Rogers understood, is magnetic in a way your people-pleasing self could never be. It draws in those who are capable of genuine intimacy, while repelling those who are only interested in using your compliance for their own comfort. When you stop pleasing others, you also discover that the world doesn't end. The catastrophic consequences you imagined, everyone abandoning you, being seen as selfish, losing all your relationships, don't materialize in the way you feared. Some relationships do change. Some people do express disappointment that you're no longer available to manage their emotions or fulfill their unspoken needs. But the sky doesn't fall. Instead, you begin to experience what Rogers called congruence, an alignment between your inner experience and your outer expression. You say what you mean. You feel what you feel without apology. You want what you want without shame. This isn't selfishness. It's wholeness. Rogers observed that people who achieve this congruence begin to trust themselves in ways they never thought possible. They trust their gut feelings. They trust their boundaries. They trust their ability to handle whatever consequences come from being authentic. They discover that they are far stronger and more resilient than they ever imagined when they were busy performing weakness to earn protection. The most profound thing that happens when you stop pleasing others is that you begin to like yourself. Not the polished performing version, but the real, messy, complicated, beautifully human version. You begin to understand that your worth isn't conditional on your usefulness to others. You begin to grasp what Rogers knew to be the fundamental truth of human existence. You are inherently valuable, not because of what you do, but because of who you are. This shift in self-perception changes everything. You stop apologizing for existing. You stop asking permission to take up space. You stop making yourself smaller to help others feel bigger. You begin to stand in your full presence, and you discover that this presence is a gift to the world. Not because it serves others, but because it's genuine. When you stop pleasing others, you become what Rogers called a fully functioning person. Someone who lives from their core, who trusts their inner wisdom, who can engage authentically with the world without losing themselves in the process. You become someone who can love without losing yourself, who can give without depleting yourself, who can connect without disappearing. This isn't a journey that happens overnight. It's a gradual awakening, a slow return to yourself. But every time you choose your truth over their comfort, every time you honor your boundary over their expectation, every time you risk their disappointment to preserve your integrity, you take another step toward the person you were always meant to be. Rogers spent his life helping people remember this truth. You don't have to earn your place in this world. You don't have to perform for love. You don't have to diminish yourself to uplift others. Your authentic self, messy, imperfect, gloriously real, is not just enough. It's everything. When you stop pleasing others, you don't become less loving. You become truly loving. You don't become less valuable. You become invaluable. You don't lose yourself. You find yourself. And that self, the one that's been waiting patiently beneath all the performance and pleasing, is magnificent beyond measure. The question isn't whether you can survive without their approval. The question is, can you survive without your own?